Well, thank you for joining us. I am so looking forward to this conversation between Kirsten Furlong and Amanda Hamilton. It's been a long time since they were artists in residence in Goodhart, but it doesn't seem long at all because we've kept in touch and they continue to help us with our artist residency program in really instrumental ways. Hello, my name is Sue Kelso. I'm one of the co-founders of the Goodhart Artist Residency. I am coming to you from Goodhart, our home, and Goodhart is located in northern Michigan on the lands of the Waganakesing Odawa people. I describe myself as an older woman with grayish reddish hair. I'm wearing glasses and well, it looks black, but it's a deep forest green sweater. Joining me here, but off screen, is Bill Kelso. He's taking care of technology for us, but another co-founder of the residency. I'm going to introduce the two artists to you, but start sharing on my screen so as we can see some images. Okay, Kirsten Furlong. These are images of Kirsten when she was here as an artist in residence in 2015, and she returned again for an alumni show, I believe, in 2017. So Kirsten is the director of the Blue Galleries and a lecturer in the Department of Art, Design, and Visual Studies at Boise State University. She earned her MFA at Boise State with a concentration in painting and printmaking. Her work has been shown nationally and internationally in solo and group exhibitions. Kirsten examines the ecological and poetic bonds we have with animals, plants, and insects on land that we collectively inhabit. Through multimedia projects created from the viewpoint of a mixed-race Black-white woman in the American West, Kirsten has an extensive list of titles and experiences within the art world, and with attending many artist residencies. She served on the Goodhart Artist Residency Board during the formative years of getting the nonprofit off the ground. She continues to share her expertise with the residency as a panelist for the Elevating Diverse Voices program. Hello, Kirsten.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here with several of my favorite people and talking about Goodhart. The photos are just a wonderful walk down memory lane from the open studio when I did my residency in 2015. Sue instructing me on how to make a silver ring in her studio during my residency, which was an unexpected and wonderful experience to get to visit with an executive director who's an artist herself, and then coming back in 2017 to take part in the exhibition at the Crooked Tree Art Center, which was wonderful. And you can see the piece of one of the larger drawings that I worked on at the open studio and then framed and in the exhibition. So I am here today in Idaho, in Boise, at Boise State, in my office in the Center for the Visual Arts, which is a beautiful new art facility on the campus of Boise State. So it's wonderful to be here.
All right, thank you so much. So Amanda Hamilton, Goodhart resident in 2017. Amanda currently is the department co-chair and professor of art and design at Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. She has an MFA in painting from Claremont Graduate University. Hamilton's artistic outlets take the form of collage, printmaking, and painting. She has also spent time creating video works. Amanda's CV is also vast in her experiences in the arts, and she has been awarded numerous residencies. Amanda served on the board of the Goodhart Artist Residency again during our formative years, and she was instrumental in the development of our Parent Artist Residency program. So thank you, Amanda, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I echo what Kirsten said. This is just such a great reunion, and it's been so fun to be a part of the Goodhart community. And as I look at these pictures, it's the same thing. It really brings to mind such rich experiences. While I was there, fell in love with geology and stones and walking the beach and collecting bits and pieces and trying to learn to identify things. And I love this bottom middle picture of Sue and I. Bill and Sue actually came out with me literally in the middle of the night to the middle of Lake Michigan to see a meteor shower, which was one of the reasons I'd applied for the residency at that time. And so just having all those memories and realizing how some of these interests have only grown in the work and been impacted by my time at Goodhart has been really, really fun. It's fun to see these photos. Okay, so I am coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm sitting in my studio in the Northeast Arts District. And if you hear like pitter pattering, we have kind of haily snow coming down today. But it's really great to be here, and I'm just so excited to talk with Kirsten and have a little reunion here.
Very good. You know, Amanda, I remember how much my neck hurt after looking up for almost 2 hours on that cruise, that middle of the night cruise, but it was awesome. It was awesome.
It was awesome.
Okay, so the last image here is a beautiful picture of the two of you together in Philadelphia, I believe an Artist Communities Alliance or Alliance of Artist Communities at the time conference. And these are beautiful images of current work for both of you. And I look forward to hearing more about this as you guys have your conversation today. So with that, I will turn it over to you. I'm going to stop the share and turn it over to you for your wonderful conversation and reunion. So thank you so much.
Maybe I'll start by saying I had the good fortune to recently, in January of 2023, I was a resident at the James Castle House in Boise, which meant I was spoiled to get to see Kirsten and her work. And I got to see some fabulous, very large scale work that she just installed in the faculty show there. So I would love, Kirsten, if you wanted to talk about that new piece. And I'll just say for scale, standing in front of it in the galleries, it absolutely is so much taller than, maybe 3-4 feet taller than an average height standing person. And so you really feel the scale. I felt really dwarfed and taken in by the scale of the work.
Great. Yeah. So this is a new work. And it's a new work that's been in progress for quite a while. So I'll just go back and give a little history of how it came to be. In 2020, I was lucky enough to be invited to the Great Plains Art Museum on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln to do a solo exhibition and then also be their artist in residence. The exhibition unfortunately opened on March 6th, 2020. So if you remember what was going on then, it wasn't a great time to have the show open. And so that the show opened, and then the next week I was supposed to be there in residence. And so of course everything was shut down. But the amazing thing is that the exhibition was extended, the residency was rescheduled for the following year. And so I still got to go there and be in that place, and it influenced a lot of the work that I've been doing recently, including this piece. So while I was there, the artists in residence at the Great Plains Art Museum includes the commissioning of work that you make while you're there that becomes part of the collection. And so I was interested in exploring a grassland species of bird because it's come to light recently that grassland species who for many years have been one of the quickest declining species of birds have still continued to decline very quickly. And the bobolink is just, to me, like such an amazing, I'm really into birds, but just a mind-blowing small, it's not visually, maybe to someone who's not so interested in birds, wouldn't be a super visually exciting bird, but it's just very stunning looking. It's a black bird, and so it's black, but it has this very kind of shocking yellow cap on the back of its head that looks almost like it's wearing like a blonde wig to me. And it has this very distinct white line down its back. And it sounds like R2-D2. It has the most unusual kind of bubbling, electronic sounding song. And unfortunately, it lives, really Great Plains and then eastward, but has declined really significantly due to habitat loss and also climate change. It's a ground nesting bird. So it nests because there is so few standing grasslands left. It often nests in agricultural fields, so things like hay fields, and often currently when farmers are harvesting hay, which is happening more and more early in the season due to climate change, the nests are destroyed, which is another big part of why its numbers are declining. And so I became like really interested in just doing some images about this bird. The other thing that really fascinated me about it is that even though it's a small songbird, it has one of the longer migration routes of the small songbirds. It travels twice a year, about 6,000 miles from, the eastern United States down into South America. And even though it lives, really Great Plains and eastward in the United States, there are populations out here in the West. When I want to see one and I don't want to go too far out of my neighborhood, I drive over to Eastern Oregon. Malheur Bird Refuge is a place where you can find them. But even the Western populations fly east first and then they fly down. So an even longer trip. And that's, so it's like 12,000 miles a year that a bird, this little tiny bird, might be flying, and also navigating at night. So the pieces that I made while at Great Plains were smaller scale. I, was finishing them during this 2-week residency. So I completed 2 pieces about the bobolink that are in their collection. But when I got back, I really was like, I want to do, in my studio, a much larger piece, like a really monumental, big piece to call attention to my interest in this bird. So I started working on this piece, and it took me, with a lot of other projects kind of interspersed, which is often how I work. Like I'll have something big, but then I'll have other deadlines and small works that I have to do for shows or other things. I really worked on it for like 2.5 years. It's 8 feet, the drawing itself is 8 feet tall. So it's installed here, the top of the bird is maybe, 9.5 feet in the gallery. One side is this image of the bird, and then the other side is this silhouette, or it almost looks like a void when you're looking at it, especially on a white wall. And then it has this depiction of the night sky. And it's currently in an exhibition at the Blue Galleries where this photograph was taken, our biennial faculty exhibition. And we have, even though in my studio, I have 8-foot walls. So it went from like, when it was vertical, it went like, I made it as exactly as tall as would fit on my studio wall. So it was really nice to be able to have it in this space. And we have very expansive tall walls, so it finally had some room above it and below it. So Amanda, now you already mentioned that we did get to see each other recently, and it was so wonderful to be able to step into the studio at the James Castle House and see what you're working on, in particular because you're working on collage, which is something that's different from the works that I've known over the years for you to work on. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have never worked in collage before. I've often used my own photographs, or every once in a while found imagery for painting resources, but I've never actually worked in collage. So this was completely new. This started, I've been artist residency rich the last 18 months. Last summer, I got to spend time at Vashon artist residency, and that is Puget Sound outside of Seattle, and also immediately wanted to walk the beaches, gather stones. Actually got to meet with a geologist out there and talk through the age and story of all the different stones that I was collecting, start to learn to identify, things that are geologically specific to that region. So if you visit my home, I have all these big bowls of like, these are the Puget Sound stones, these are the Goodhart stones, these are the Kansas Prairie Flintstone. So I've gotten really excited about understanding the kind of regional differences and geologic history and deep time. So those collages were kind of a surprise to me. I brought some books that I'd been cutting up, and I wasn't totally sure. It was almost one of those little projects you bring for yourself so you don't waste time. You know, it's like, as I'm mulling things over, I had intended to make these paintings. And actually I can just show you some of those paintings. In my studio, I have a bunch of things up on the wall right now. And so actually quickly, so I had been at Goodhart the time that I was there in 2017, making things that were much more textural and have a lot of surface texture to them. And so those works were very abstract and even really non-objective. They weren't meant to refer to any particular necessarily, right, a landscape or place or image. But then I've always had the landscape in my work. So you can see all these different images where I have always been concerned, especially as a painter. Landscape is such a huge genre and history of how we think about why paintings were made, what that means, whose land is it. There's so much that's in there to think about. And so I had actually been thinking I was going to work on some representational paintings again. So this painting here, and then these two that are really very much in process, were works that I took with me this summer to Vashon and thought that that's what I would be working on. But actually, once I got there, I did start painting and I enjoyed that process, but I just found myself completely distracted by these collages. I started to cut up, this actually started with one particular source, which was a Christie's 2019 catalog of minerals, meteors, and fossils. And so, you know, Christie's, beautiful reproductions, very clear images, nice paper. So I started cutting out these objects and thinking about that. But it's funny, I mean, Sue, seeing that image of the boat at night, I thought, oh, I had no idea that meteor shower has turned into this kind of recurrence of this concern I have of, you know, loving these beautiful natural objects, but also having this sense of a real like misunderstanding on the part of humans, or like a sign of like why do we see that this gorgeous meteor shower happens and then go chasing for these objects because we can ascribe value to them and sell them and turn them into capital? Like, to me, that feels like such a misunderstanding and missed opportunity of being in the world with all the wonders of the world. So that kind of is what started, right, is me being a little bit bothered by the selling and collecting and sort of sometimes even like a hoarding. Like, the more that I've learned about the gem, mineral, meteor, fossil world, a lot of these private collections, just like with maybe major paintings or sculptures, it's taking these objects out of circulation where they can't be enjoyed by, you know, generally by folks, but they're kind of cloistered away in these private kind of uber Wunderkammern like collections so anyways, thinking about all that stuff, but then also realizing the other books that I had grabbed, and some of this is thrift store stuff that I'd collected over the years, were about like state parks and land preservation, which then is also loaded because it's like there's an impulse to keep something pristine, and yet it's also a conversation in those books from, say, the 50s that didn't have any conversation about First Peoples or whose land that was. And so I'm just finding, as I was kind of like mulling over these images, it's just really complicated and fraught, this idea of beauty, because I think that is what is also at the forefront for me, is this idea of, you know, the world is actually really beautiful. You know, Kirsten is a bird person, and I've turned into a stone person, and, you know, and a horizon line person. It's like all these things are actually so beautiful and worth our time and contemplation and honoring that space. But so I don't know. So the collages became this whole new thing, and I've been working on them for about 7 months and just really loving that process. And a lot of the work, some of the work I've done in the past has been really labor intensive oh, Kirsten, you can relate to this. So in a way, the collages, it's a different kind of labor. Like, in some ways they feel like they come together very quickly, and that feels really exciting. In other ways, the kind of contemplation and making of groupings and looking for forms feels like a really wonderful opportunity for slow looking. And yeah, so I really have liked this process.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, having, been able to see your work for many years now, like I just see like these amazing through lines, like through your work. I mean, going back to like Beautiful Terrible. I remember visiting you at the studio at the college where you were working at the time. And I don't know, I think it was like pretty early on after we met. And you
Yeah.
took me in that room where the set was. And I was like, wow, this woman is like, what is going on in here? Like, it's amazing. Even though I wasn't quite sure at that point, like, well, what is this gonna end up being? And just for those of you who, I mean, this is her work from like maybe what we want to say 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is quite a while ago, but anyway, she made this beautiful video about this lake that disappeared in Russia, right?
Yep.
And the film was all filmed from a little tiny miniature set of the lake and the surrounding landscape and trees. So there was this little mini,
Yeah, it was a 4x4 foot square model, but this entire kind of space had to occur within that. Yeah.
Yeah. And and subsequently, we ended up doing a show like once the film was made. So obviously, like that impulse to look at, this beauty and landscape, and also the just sort of the immensity of experience of this thing happening in the landscape, this very, strange occurrence of this lake disappearing. And then through, like the paintings that you were doing that are more abstract, but the surfaces, the materials, all sort of reference these kind of geologic things that you're talking about. And then coming into I'm kind of skipping over a lot, but then coming into these collages, there's that through line of these interests, and just the visual quality of all the work is just, there's always this amazing thread that kind of comes through everything. And I love that just between you and I, we have this connection too, and a connection to Goodheart related to the night sky. Because when I was at Goodheart in 2015, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it had just recently been designated an International Dark Sky Park there in Michigan, that we went to visit, and it was incredible. Unfortunately, the night that we were there, it was cloudy, so we didn't get like the super night sky view, but it still was really exciting. And we got to see, I think his name is Paul Bogard, who wrote a book about the night sky. He was giving a talk, and I think it was actually that sort of led to the conversation that I had with you, Amanda, about going there, because you were at the time doing the work that was the paintings that were predominantly Black. And so I was talking about this writer, and the writer was from Minneapolis. So I was like, oh, hey, you should check this. I think I mentioned his book and said, you should check this guy out. And this residency was amazing. And it's, fairly close to this dark sky park. So if I remember right, that's kind of how we got the conversation going, and which ultimately probably led to you applying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. That is 100% how I ended up applying to Goodheart. On your recommendation, and also the Dark Sky Park. I had really, at that time, I was really thinking about darkness, and those paintings that I shared a minute ago, these small dark paintings. It's really funny because I think now when I look at them and I think about my interest in geology that's grown, I can definitely see like earthenness and surface qualities that feel like that. But that really wasn't like a conscious thing. I think at the time, the two things I was really interested in thinking about darkness were a kind of like non-objective, like I had been such a representational painter, and I really wondered, like, am I is it even possible for me to make a thing that is non-objective, that's non-referral to another image or space? Like, these are dorky painter questions, but like things like, could I eliminate this kind of foreground, background, middle distance? Or like, how could I have for myself like a really different, materially different sense of space? And not even just flatness either, because they're so textured. But I was really trying to do something that was really unfamiliar for me. And it is very funny to now see them and feel like there is a real connection to this kind of earthenness and materiality. And actually, that's the funny thing, is the reason after being at Good Heart, I think that really reinforced my love of stones. And I started trying to collect objects from the natural world that were very dark. It was like, what are the naturally very dark things from the world, not synthetic or fabricated things or pigments? And that led to some stones, but then also I think I just started looking for very dark things, you know, and like looking even at fabricated things like really dark velvet fabric. Or I found these photo books from the 60s, these Time Life, like how-to photography books that had this incredibly velvety dark printing. And like that printing kind of, I was attracted to because of the deepness of the value. But as it turns out, those are in the collages. I had no idea, you know, I was looking at this dark surface thinking, okay, what could I do with that? Or how can I understand this kind of, you know, and I know people will say like Vanta Black and all these pigments that have been made, and that's fine. I mean, I think those don't interest me as much, especially once there's kind of like a trademark and, you know, trying to commodify it or like limit it from other people doesn't interest me. But this idea of like a very dark thing was something I was definitely kind of chasing. And hilariously, it led straight to books that ended up being collage books. You know, I got some of my landscapes and images from those books that ended up going into these current collages.
Yeah, I loved like just seeing all the different materials laid out when you're working on those collages, like just and that, you know, I think that connection to archiving and collecting and everything that you were talking about are all things that I'm interested in as well. So I think that's why that work really resonates with me. I think, oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, you know, one of the things, I think we do have that in common. I think that idea of collection and archive and like close knowing, like identification and like really becoming familiar with something and trying to understand. But one thing that struck me, and I'm so glad I got to see the work that you just talked about, that current work with the 2 Bobolinks forms, is that I feel like the scale that you made those at really brings up that feeling of wonder. Like they're so large and I feel myself to be so small standing in front of them that it really naturally invites for the viewer this sense of like close looking, and also like with the night sky, right? That feeling, or like Sue was saying, like, oh, my neck almost hurts because I'm like looking up, trying to see this. And I think the scale of your recent work really gives that feeling or that invitation of like, I'm looking up at this thing and it's yielding. I mean, there's so much fine detail that you've done in those works that it's like the closer you get, the more there is to see. And so even at that grand scale, you get this huge impression that for me invites the right kind of like humility or like the potential of being kind of amazed. But also when you get up close, there's so much beautiful visual information and the surface is so embroidered with mark and detail that it's like, I don't know, there's an intimacy, but also, you know, a kind of quiet like grandiosity to the scale that I really loved.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's great to be able to work on a project like that at that scale, which kind of leads me into our next question about, I mean, I think I'll kind of combine these because I think for both of us, these are so connected, like studio time, residency time, what that looks like. I think our initial connection to each other kind of came out of our experience, both being arts administrators, gallery directors at these 2, you know, local universities. And one, because when you're a gallery director and that's embedded as part of an art department, you're kind of the the lonely only of your job description because all your colleagues are faculty that have, it's like different job description, and there's usually only one of you like that's working at any university. So there was that connection. But I think also it's great to have connections with other artists that have the same kind of workhorse that you might have, like our workhorse as university faculty, and the sort of preciousness of our time in the studio is similar.
Yeah.
So what does that look like recently for you? Being in the studio, looking forward to maybe future residencies. I know you've done a lot recently, but what's happening in that realm right now?
Yeah, I feel like, so I've been in higher ed for 18 years now, and I feel like I'm always kind of struggling to integrate regular studio time with my academic year commitments. I'm also a parent, and so like Sue mentioned, it's been a real area of passion for me to, well, at first seeking out residencies that allowed maybe families, but also to support the processes of residencies, thinking through that. I love that Good Heart really has so much availability for folks in different places and different circumstances in their practice. But yeah, so I think that between academic year and then, other obligations, caretaking, it is hard to get what, in my mind, it's like, I would love a 6 to 8 hour day. That feels ideal in my mind. But what I actually find is I can get a lot done in 2 or 3 hours. And so I'm just trying to, for all these years, integrate more and more a little work during the year. But I will say residencies have been my lifeline. And summer break, I'm on spring break right now. I've been in the studio every day, all day long, and it's been fabulous. But yeah, and recently, my daughter's going to be 16 soon. I built this kind of art table in my studio. We just built one for her this week. So she's coming with me often to work on her own work while I'm doing my thing. So that feels, really nicely. I mean, life is all of a piece. And so being able to bring all those different pieces, home and studio and to residencies, and that feels really good. And so, yeah, I think I tend to work in fits and starts. I've also tended to get really frustrated when the conversation around artist practice focuses on a sort of right way, to have like a really consistent practice or something. I really find that I've done some of my best work in these really big pushes. And it may be that for like months on end, maybe all I'm doing, I shouldn't say all I'm doing, maybe what I'm doing for months on end is reading and thinking and keeping my sketchbook / studio journal. And these ideas are germinating. Years and years ago, when I was in high school, I heard a poet that I really loved this idea. Claudibel Alegria talked about writing down all these ideas for poems and words in what she referred to as her seed books. And she would keep these, journals, notebooks, writing books on her shelf. And she would say, these are my seed books, and I'll put it there. And at a much later date, I may pull that book out and something's germinated. And so I've really loved that idea in my own creative practice, that it may be months and months of no sort of physical changes happening in the studio or with the work, but these ideas and intentions are getting clarified and growing. And then when I do get that time, it often feels like everything happens so fast, like I really feel like I can make the most of that and really focus and make quick choices that I'm excited about, that I don't think I could make if I weren't also having some time to kind of mull over, let things grow. How about you?
Yeah. Oh, a lot of that resonates with me in terms of how I work. I definitely think of residencies, it's like a way for me to just reset my priorities, my thinking. Like so much of my everyday is supporting my students, supporting the artists that I'm curating into exhibitions, like doing all these different things that are about working with other people's work and talking about other people's work, and that kind of deep thinking about how can I help this student develop their project for their BFA show. And it's difficult for me then when it's spring break, it's summer break, and that's like I can get back in the studio, like to shut that off and just focus on what I need to do or what I want to do, or even to like get back in the mindset of where I was the last time I was in the studio. So yeah, I think for me, like residencies function as getting, physically and mentally like away from that sort of everyday. So I can just have this like mental shift to like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to get back to this project. And then having the time and the sort of, kind of uncomplicated place and space to actually get back into it. So they're like vital for me. Sometimes I feel like, well, if I don't do that, then I just, I'll go in the studio and I'll just look around like it just doesn't feel right. Because if I haven't been there in like a month, even though I've been thinking a lot about the work, it just takes a minute to get into the, the physical and mental space of being there. But as soon as I'm, in a residency, and then after the period after, once things are kind of going, then it always just kind of feeds on itself, and then I can kind of get back into projects. And I love too just to experience place and these environments firsthand. Like there's just nothing like that, and it's hard for me to make these work that are about these different species or different plants and landscapes and the people that inhabit these places, and what's going on there without actually being in the places. So that's a big part of it for me too, getting to residencies and using that as an impetus for whatever I'm doing in the studio.
So I would also resonate that the following a residency feels like a really rich time for me. And I often, it's like momentum. Like I have a really rich time at a residency and I feel, like you said, very clarified, very focused and inspired by, the work, the space, the experience. And then the time after that feels like it kind of runs itself for a while. And that momentum is there. So I'm curious, what's next for you, or how do you have residencies coming up in the next year? Do you have projects that are still running from some of those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two biggest things that I have coming up, one, it's forthcoming. We're still working on the details of it. So I will do a future like report to Good Heart as an alumni about this project. But I'll say for now, it is a project with a national environmental organization that I very much respect and I'm just so excited to work for. And I'm doing a project that will be in their magazine, and it will be published just as part of their work. So I'll be doing that late spring, early summer. So that's the next big studio project. And then I do have a residency this summer, and it's at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. And I've never been there. I've never been to that part of the country. And I kind of very specifically decided to apply to this because I tend to, because of the things that I just talked about needing this kind of reset. And I tend to, and also because I'm interested in the Western landscape and things here in the West, like I tend to apply to residencies that are like, it'll be you out off grid in the desert, with no one else around. Like I'm really drawn to those kind of places. But after the pandemic and just all that time of just being more isolated, I thought, I'm going to apply to a residency where there's a bunch of other artists that I can interact with, because every time I have been to a residency with other artists, they've always been these like long-term relationships that have been so fulfilling. Like I did my first residency in 2003, so 20 years ago, at Gentel Artist Residency in Wyoming. And I was there with, just a small group, 5 other artists and writers. And I would say 3 of those artists I still connect with on a very regular basis. One of them teaches at the University of the Arts. She's just an amazing printmaker, Rebecca Gilbert. And I, on Zoom last year, I talked to her class at the University of the Arts. I follow her work. It's amazing. And so it's just been an amazing experience. So yeah, I decided to apply. This one in particular, it's like it's a very large campus. So they have like 20, over 20 artists at a time. So I'll get to be in this community with a bunch of other artists in a place I've never been. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that's funny. I think I did my first residency. I want to say it was summer of 2003, maybe 4, but I'm pretty sure 2003 at Idlewild in California. And I also have a couple folks I met there that have stayed friends. And that's so fun to have those connections and experiences. I don't have any residencies coming up. I had such a remarkable set of experiences this year. I feel like I have a lot to keep processing, and I'm taking a break. I hadn't mentioned it, but you know what? You would think that I'm following Kirsten around and just copycatting her whole residency life, because I also this last summer went to Prairie Side artist residency, which was remarkable. And I had also learned about from Kirsten. And that was a very beautiful, remote, quiet place. I had such a rich time there. But yeah, I feel like I have a lot to process from the experiences I've had this year already. So my goal is to just be in the studio, and yeah, it's too soon to say, but I'm excited about this collage project, and I can feel some iterations of that project growing that we'll report back later and see what happens. But that's what I'm going to be working on this year.
Yeah. And we're both, I think, going to be in Good Heart in September of 2023 for the 10-year anniversary. So we get to see each other again.
So excited. Yes, that's going to be wonderful. I can't wait. I am such a huge fan of Good Heart. I have, loved the opportunities, large and small, that I've had to support that community. And I've learned so much through that process in that community. And it's just a total joy to stay connected to everything Good Heart and Bill and Sue and all the other folks that are involved.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, having been on the board during the planning stages of the new facility, and I feel like since I was on the board, like Good Heart has just like bloomed into this amazing, like every time I get a newsletter, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this list of, I just got the one the other day about the artists for 2023, 24. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at this list of artists. It's like remarkable, just, how everything has really grown there. And just to see that studio and see the residents is super exciting. So.
Well, thank you both for those kind words about the residency, and you both were definitely instrumental in even just looking at what we should do, how we should create that space of the residency. We sought input and everything. So just gratitude to you both that you applied to the program, that we've had this opportunity for our paths to cross. I love birds. I love stones. I loved your conversation. So thank you for that. And yes, the 10-year gathering in September is going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. And you both experienced the old residency space, which was above our garage behind me, and you'll get to experience the new residency space now in Good Heart, that I think we're at least 4 to 5 years in on that already. So yeah, just thank you very much so much. And I do need to thank our sponsors and our donors and our volunteers and everybody that helps us nurture artists, writers, and composers in good heart. And I'll read these off the screen here. Michigan Arts and Culture Council, Northwest Michigan Arts and Culture Network, Arts Midwest, National Endowment for the Arts, the Fry Foundation, and Sustainable Arts Foundation. Thank you to everybody that helps us do this work as an artist residency.